Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no change, nor shadow of turning. Having purposed it, he brought us forth by the word of truth, for us to be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Shalom, shalom, Israel. We're back and we are looking at living for Him. These are the four key aspects of a believer's life that we must develop in order to walk like Yahushua Messiah. That's at a heart level, at our mind, and our words and our actions. And we've been looking at the 9 spiritual gifts or manifestations of the Ruach or the Spirit that help develop these 3 areas of the mind, our words, and our actions. Now, we left off by looking at a word of knowledge, and today we're going to look at a word of wisdom. The Proverbs tell us in 4:7 that wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. So we want to be able to better understand what wisdom is today and be able to distinguish it from a word of knowledge. We also have read, and I'm going to read again in our key text in 1 Corinthians 12, verses 1 and 7 and 8, it is written, "Now concerning spiritual gifts, brothers, I do not wish you to be ignorant," verse 7, "and to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for profiting." Again, the whole purpose of these gifts are to build up the body of believers and to build ourselves up as well. For one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, and to another a word of knowledge according to the same Spirit. Same Spirit, different manifestations. Also in Proverbs 24, verse 3, it is written, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established, and by knowledge the rooms are filled with all the precious and pleasant riches." And today we're going to learn a little bit more by how is it that wisdom builds a house? Okay, we're going to look at some word definitions. This is always a good thing to do if you're doing a study. There's so many tools available now that you can just type in the word and see every passage that a word is used in the scripture. And I actually, this is one reason why this has taken longer to develop. It's because I got sidetracked and I read all the scriptures that dealt with the word wisdom, wise, and things like that. And it gives a fuller context whenever you're studying the scripture anyways. If you read every verse that has that word in it, you're going to better understand how it's used and things like that, the context. So what we're going to do is look at the word knowledge, because we're trying to, again, for all these gifts, they're slightly different. They're not the same. And actually a word of wisdom was kind of given to me about how to explain maybe the Ruach a little bit. You could kind of use the analogy of a salad. Although a salad is a cod, it's one salad. There's many distinct features of it that it's not all just lettuce, but you may have olives, you may have cheese, and these different things that are very distinct in of themselves. And the spiritual gifts are like that. Even though they're working together as one, Hekad, the same spirit, different manifestations equip the body in different ways. And it's really important to distinguish between the spiritual gifts, even though they're working together. And that's why we're going to be looking at what does the knowledge mean versus wisdom. And we're just going to look at just some Hebrew definitions of the word knowledge, and it can be used a couple different ways. Dot, which means knowledge or information, is one way that Hebrew word can be used, where the word yada is a very more intimate knowing. It goes beyond just knowing information. It's a more of an experience where it's about relationship, like a man and a wife and things like that. Now in Jeremiah 31 verse 34, when we're talking about the renewed covenant, this word yada is used for covenant language, where it's written, "For they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith Yahuwah." So this is, as you can see, is a very intimate knowing. And So those are some words for knowledge in the Hebrew, but in the Greek it's gnosis. And I thought one interesting way this was used is that it is especially in reference to things lawful or unlawful, basically tied into right living. Again, knowledge could be good or evil. Now, in the first time this is used in Scripture, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So information, not knowledge, could be either one. And even though in Daniel it says knowledge shall increase, we want to definitely be increasing our knowledge of what is good. Um, Now, the word for wisdom, hokmah, in the Hebrew, um, it means basically to have skill in something, and we'll kind of draw this out. One way this was used, and actually it ties into the spirit of wisdom. I should say, knowledge, you can say it's what something is. It's just what is it? It answers that question, or know. To know something is basically knowledge, but wisdom is more about how it works, or know how does it operate in the real world. And as we look through these scriptures today, you're going to see that more, that knowledge is another layer. It goes beyond just the or wisdom is another layer. It goes beyond the knowledge. It goes to how that knowledge is actually applied in one's life in a skillful way. Here's an example of this in the book of Exodus 28 verse 3. And thou shalt speak unto all that are wise hearted, whom I have filled with the spirit of wisdom, that they may make Aaron's garments to consecrate him, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. So here there were certain individuals that were wise, and the spirit of wisdom. They know how to do different things to help build up the body. And in the Greek, this word is Sophia, and again, it's skill in the management of affairs, and it's the setting of things in order. And remember the whole idea of building up a house. Wisdom has built a house. You can have all the tools available. You can have hammers, you can have nails, and all this, kind of like information. But you got to know how to put that all together. It takes wisdom to be able to build a house. And just because you have knowledge of the word, you have to be able to apply the word to your life very practically, and that's a whole nother level. And there's different ways you can understand this spiritual gift of wisdom. And as we walk further along with Messiah, this can be cultivated as we know His Word and we experience that Word more. We know Him more. We're going to have more wisdom as well, a spirit of the word of knowledge and word of wisdom both working together. And there's different layers to this, but on the first layer is just simply knowing how to apply the word directly into one's life. And we're going to look at some examples throughout Scripture how this is used here shortly. We're going to start off by looking at Romans chapter 8 verse 9, where it's written, "But you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of Elohim dwells in you. And if anyone does not have the Spirit of Messiah, this one is not his." Now notice that in this passage it equates the Spirit of Elohim, and the Spirit of Messiah all together. And that's really key to understand, that the Spirit of Elohim is the Spirit of Messiah, and that is the Spirit that should be within us. And that's what the renewed covenant is all about, that He would write that Torah in our heart via the Spirit, that He would actually be leading us and guiding us by His Ruach, and that's really foundational. Now also, another thing is, throughout the Scripture we see this prophecy of the Messiah having the Spirit of Elohim and even the Spirit of wisdom. So this is not a new thing. I just want to point this out. In Isaiah 11 verses 1 and 2 it is written, "A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, and from his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of Yahuwah rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and the fear of Yahuwah." Also, we see in the very first book, Genesis, Bereshit, in chapter 41, "And Pharaoh said to his servants, Could we find another like him, a man in whom is the spirit of Elohim? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since Elohim has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and as wise as you. This is incredible because, first of all, we have Pharaoh having enough sense to realize the spirit of Elohim was in Joseph and that he was wise. Now, the little backdrop on this, if you're not familiar with the story, Joseph went beyond interpreting the dream. Not only did he have knowledge of what Pharaoh's dream was, he had wisdom. He knew how to actually solve the problem of the dream, that there were 7 years of famine coming after the 7 years of plenty, but he gave wisdom or insight on how to actually solve the problem. And he actually was giving kind of clues to Pharaoh, saying, appoint a wise man to deal with this issue. And Pharaoh says, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. So this is, we can kind of see Yah's spirit working through people all throughout the Tanakh. And also in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 34 verse 9, we have Joshua, which has the same name in Hebrew as Yahusha, the Messiah's name here, the Yod-Heh-Wah-Shin-Ayin name. And Yahusha, the son of Nun, which means life, was filled with the spirit of wisdom, for Moshe had laid his hands on him, and the children of Israel listened to him and did as Yahuwah had commanded Moshe. Now, one of the best individuals in the Tanakh that really demonstrate the spirit of wisdom is Daniel. In the book of Daniel, chapter 2, it is written, then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision, and Daniel blessed the Elah of the heavens. Daniel responded and said, blessed be the name of Allah, the forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his, and he changes times and seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who possess understanding. He reveals deep and secret matters. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank you and praise you, O Allah of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter. Now, this is incredible because, again, Daniel, like Joseph, was able to understand dreams. And the really fascinating thing here is he says in this prayer or acknowledgement to Yah, he says, he gives wisdom to the wise. So wisdom is given to the wise. And that leads us to a very important question. Who is wise according to the scripture? Well, in Proverbs 28 verse 7, it's pretty clear. He who keeps the Torah is a wise son. Let me repeat that again. He who keeps the Torah is a wise son. And this lines up almost verbatim what Messiah says in Matthew 7:24, where he goes, therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, it's like that word Shema, hear and do, hear and obey, he shall be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Remember, we're talking about wisdom has built a house, and this is really tying in all throughout the scripture, this wisdom in building a house, and where we're building this house is even important, what we're building it on. I'm going to repeat Messiah's words here again. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them shall be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Now, so this answers a question. The reason why, a lot of people don't understand this, the reason why Yah answered his prayer is because Daniel was actually at a very heart level keeping the instructions of Yah. As a matter of fact, we know this in the very first chapter. It says that Daniel purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the king's food, meat, and drink, and that he, even in exile, did not want to dishonor his maker, that he had a heart after the creator. And we can see this throughout the book of Daniel, especially if you go to Daniel chapter 9, when he prays to Yah and he is confessing the sins of himself and his fathers. You can see that his heart was definitely towards the Torah and Yah's ways. So this is a really critical thing to understand, that wisdom is given to the wise. We're going to look at a few more scriptures that really draw this out. To better understand the wise, it's nice to be able to compare the wise with the fool or the foolish, good versus evil, and life versus death by looking at the scriptures. Let's read. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear Yahuwah and turn away from evil. This word evil in the Hebrew is actually the word ra, which means bad, malignant, pain, ill, unhappiness, misery, unpleasant, displeasing, hurtful, wrong, and calamity. Basically, it's like the curse of Deuteronomy 28. If we don't hear and obey, the curse, the evil, the sickness, the disease comes upon us. And it says, and in the fear of Yahuwah, one turns away from evil. But to turn away from evil is an abomination to fools. Fools hate knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline. The fool has said in his heart, there is no Yahuwah. See, a fool not only despises Yahuwah, but he despises his word as well. Evil pursues sinners, but good is repaid to the righteous. This is directly from Deuteronomy 28, where the evil or the curse pursues those who break Torah, but good, the blessing to those who hear and obey, that is, aka the righteous. The fear of the Yahuwah is the beginning of wisdom. That means to put the Torah, the knowledge, into practice. All those doing the commandments in context, have a good understanding. His praise is standing forever. Praise Yah. Blessed is the man who fears Yahuwah and who has greatly delighted in his commands. He who keeps Torah is a wise son. He who walks with the wise shall be wise, but the companion of fools suffers evil or the curse. Cursed is everyone who does not establish the words of this Torah. See, I'm setting before you today the blessing and the curse. The blessing when you obey the commands of Yahuwah your Elohim, which I command you today, and the curse if you do not obey the commands of Yahuwah your Elohim. I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and thy seed may live. He who despises the word is destroyed, but he who fears the command is rewarded. The Torah of the wise is a fountain of life, turning one away from the snares of death. Going through the scriptures, I can't help but think of the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. Although there's been a lot of debate on, what was it that the foolish did, but when we really understand all the scripture and we read all those verses that deal with the wise and the foolish, it gives greater insight that the foolish obviously were doing something, not obeying, not honoring the commands or Yah himself. And Proverbs 13:9 may give us insight into this. The light of the righteous rejoices, but the lamp of the wicked will be put out. And we're going to look at the context of chapter 25, which is the parable of the 10 virgins, and it may even give more insight into the wise and the foolish or the wicked. In Matthew 24, verses 45 through 51, it is written, "Who then is a trustworthy and wise servant, whom his master has set over his household to give them food in season? Blessed is that servant whom the master, having come, shall find so doing. Truly I say to you, that he shall set him over all his possessions. But if that evil servant says in his heart, My master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant shall come on a day when he does not expect it, at an hour that he does not know, and shall cut him into two, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." I just wanted to point out one thing here. In the Luke version of this, instead of saying appoint him his portion with the hypocrites, this word hypocrite basically means an actor, someone who says one thing but does another. It says in Luke's version, unbelievers. So hypocrite is basically an unbeliever. They may profess with their mouth, but in their actions, in their fruit, you can tell they are truly not believers. Kind of what James says, become a doer of the word, not a hearer only, deceiving yourself. One of the key texts we're probably going to keep looking at as we work through these gifts of the Spirit is John 16:13. "But when he comes, the Spirit of truth, he shall guide you into all the truth. For he shall not speak from himself, but whatever he hears, he shall speak, and he shall announce to you what is to come." And that's an awesome scripture, and it's very similar to Matthew 10:16 through 20. And this is a scripture I read quite often whenever meeting with someone or doing ministry or even out in the street or wherever I'm going. Years ago, I used to read this all the time just to remind me, don't worry about, how to answer, what to say, that the answer will come to you. And I'll just go ahead and read it. "See, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents, but as innocent as doves. Beware of men, for they shall deliver you up to the Sanhedrins and flog you in their congregations. And you shall be brought before governors and sovereigners, which is kings, for my sake, as a witness to them and to the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it shall be given to you in that hour what you shall speak. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking in you." And this is really important because this is both a word of knowledge and a word of wisdom. How is that? Again, how is the wisdom part? What is that word of knowledge? And we see this throughout the book of Acts, and this can be a major part of our life as we walk. And if we're paying attention to the Ruach and listening, he will give us words to speak. And sometimes we don't even know the full context, but the Spirit will speak exactly what that person needs to hear. Let's look at an example from the book of Acts. "It is written, Therefore, brothers, seek out from among you 7 men who are known to be filled with the set apart Spirit and wisdom, whom we shall appoint for this duty. But we shall give ourselves continually to prayer and to serving the word." And the word pleased the entire group, and they chose Stephanus, a man filled with belief and the set apart Spirit. Here's just one example of Stephanos, or Stephen, who was one of the 7 chose. And the scripture tells us that not only he had belief, but he had power and did great wonders and signs among the people. And this is amazing because throughout the book of Acts, we see that spirit, the promise coming on the believers, and they were able to go out with power and proclaim the word and build up the body. And even when Stephen was opposed and resisted by others, and people rose up and disputing him, they were unable to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spoke. And in Acts 7, it gives a discourse on which would end up leading to Stephen's death, but nevertheless, to be able to proclaim the word with boldness. And this is just one of many examples of multiple gifts, really, being used in the life of the believers throughout the book of Acts. The Apostle Jacob, or James, gives an incredible insight into the topic of wisdom. It is written, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask Elohim, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it shall be given to him. Receive with meekness the implanted word which is able to save your lives, and become doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Because if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what he was like. But if but he that looked into the perfect Torah, that of freedom, and continues in it, not becoming a hearer that forgets, but a doer of work, this one shall be blessed in his doing of the Torah. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by his good behavior his works in meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and self-seeking in your heart, do not boast against and lie against the truth. This is not wisdom coming from above, but it is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where jealousy and self-seeking are, there is confusion in every foul deed. But the wisdom from above is first clean, then peaceable, gentle, ready to obey, filled with compassion and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy, and the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. The Apostle Shaul, or Paul, also talks about wisdom and how the believer should walk. And this is even critically important considering the time and the age which we live. It is written, "Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these the wrath of Elohim comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore do not become partakers with them, for you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Master. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, proving what is well pleasing to the Master. And have no fellowship with the fruitless works of darkness, but rather reprove them, for it is a shame to even speak of what is done by them in secret. But all matters being reproved are manifested by the light, and whatever is manifested is light. That is why he says, Wake up, you who asleep, arise from the dead, and Messiah shall shine on you. See then that you walk exactly, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are wicked. So then do not be foolish, but understand what the desire of Yahuwah is." A psalm that ties in real nicely with the Ephesians passage we just read is Psalm 90, verse 12, where it is written, "Teach us to number our days, and let us bring the heart to wisdom." This is understanding how we ought to walk out the Father's instruction, aka the Torah, in our lives, especially in the day that we're living. The day is very evil and it's very dark, but we're supposed to be walking in the light and being an example to those around us, that we can point them to the hope of the nations, Yahushua Messiah. And knowing and cultivating the spiritual gift of wisdom is incredibly important in this day and age. There's so much information, to be able to have that knowledge of what is right and also the wisdom to apply it, this will tie in really keyly as we continue our talk in this spiritual gift of discernment or discerning of spirits, especially in this age. And you'll see how all three of these spiritual gifts, the spiritual gift of knowledge and wisdom and discernment, all three are working together and are all critical in this day and age because there is so much foolishness out there, people that have rejected Yah and His ways, that we gotta walk like the wise. And this is really critical if we're gonna have the heart, the mind, our words, and our actions line up like Yahushua Messiah. When we come back, we're going to be looking at the spiritual gift of discernment. Until next time, shalom.